It is that time now once again for getting lumped up with my friends. It's RockerMike and Rob that you should know, and you'll find them here on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show.
Rock Show.
Yep.
The number 2 podcast in America.
episode 94.
94, when we're talking about a very strange group, a very strange fella. We're talking about the Stray Cat and Brian
Setzer.
And a guy that was he was a weird fucking guy, but he was a hell of a guitar player.
I wouldn't say he was weird, unless you know something I don't, but he was different, okay? Different, the Stray Cats, to me, I'll say right now, I think they're one of the great American bands. They're definitely one of the best bands to be in the top 40 in the 80s and a little bit in the early 90s. They were doing something that really, I mean, I can remember even at the height of them being popular, like 83, 84, there was an open hostility to rockabilly music. All right. They were top 40, and
why? Because rockabilly sucks. Let's talk about it.
I don't. I love rockabilly.
Let me tell you, some of the people that listen to that music is horrible. They're a bunch of fucking. They're what's the wrestling fan? They're a bunch of.
You're gonna
fuck
shit
them.
on it.
I'm gonna shit on it. I like the music, but I didn't like the rockabilly lifestyle because some of these guys are posers. Like they say who the fuck they are. It's like
no. I mean, sometimes it's just fashion.
It's like shut up.
But hardcore rockabilly fans that take the music seriously, that's a genre I got a lot of respect for.
Oh yeah.
The Stray Cats, were the forefront of that in the 80s as far as, in the public conscience. There's always been rockabilly music since the 50s, okay? Even through the 60s.
But the style was like old school. The style they did was like a very old school kind of, like Elvis, Cash. It was like that kind of.
Yeah. I mean, they were based off of the music that came out of Sun Records in the 50s.
Yeah.
And that's what rockabilly music is. It's roots rock and roll, and it's all good. It's good drinking music. It's good hanging out, just listening to it. What I was saying about open hostility is like in the 80s. You had hair metal, okay, and it was this like whole thing with being like a guitar hero and all that stuff. And Brian, who I think is a fantastic, very underrated guitar player,
he's definitely in the top 20.
I would put him there.
He's a great guitar player,
but he doesn't get that recognition, like the late Eddie Van Halen or guys like that. I guess it just depends on the style that you like. But I would, Brian Setzer, between the Stray Cats and the orchestra, the Brian Setzer Orchestra, I mean, he's doing his own thing. And anybody that's out there doing that kind of music and actually getting by, making it popular, I got a lot of respect for. I do. And he's been like, he's a New York guy. He's from Massapequa. So, you got to give him props for that. And just watching him play, I enjoy. And I've seen the Stray Cats about maybe about three times. I think I've seen them 3 times.
I never
over the
saw
years.
the Stray Cat, but I saw the orchestra, and the orchestra was very good.
I've never seen the orchestra. I've seen Lee Rocker by himself, but I've never seen the Brian Setzer Orchestra. I don't know why. I should have. I mean, that time when they were big with like the Jump Drive and Wail in the 90s.
Yeah, it was good.
That was good. I don't know why I didn't go. I should have. But he comes around every year, pretty much.
Mike, you want to hear something? How I got to see them? I won some contest on Z100. They gave me free tickets to see them somewhere in one of these small venues, wherever it was. But it was like a small venue, and it was him and this giant orchestra. Him playing the guitar and the orchestra doing this shit. And it was great.
Yeah, I mean, great. He's a guy that's kept the 1950s culture alive. On one of his solo albums called Ignition, he even has a a song called 1959, which he talks about all different things that went on in that year. And that was the year he was born. I mean, he had a kind of like an aha moment when he was a kid. He was listening to a Beatles record, okay? And I think it was the song Honey Don't, which is originally by Carl Perkins, and the Beatles did it. And he had a moment where he was listening to it and he noticed his father was into the song and knew the song. So he was like, how do you know this? Okay. And he's like, it's a Carl Perkins song. And Brian didn't know that it was a cover and was like, oh. And then he said that intrigued him. Like, okay, here's this great band, the Beatles, covering somebody. Well, who is this guy? And Carl Perkins, was around 10 years earlier from the Beatles down in Sun Records making rockabilly records.
Yeah, of course.
So that's how he really got into it. And also one thing, they discovered rockabilly music in the 70s, early 70s, maybe a little bit earlier. But the three of them who and Brian is actually a couple years older than the other two. They were from Massapequa, Long Island, at a time when bands like probably Led Zeppelin and Grand Funk Railroad and all those early 70s monster bands were big. They had this love for rockabilly music, and it had to be weird. It had to be a weird, you're a weird fucking guy. Nobody was really listening to that in America. No. Where you had rockabilly music really flourishing since the beginning is England.
Yeah.
Okay. There's been rockabilly scenes, rockabilly revival scenes many times over the last 50, 60 years out of England. And it's all legit. I mean, these guys do it right. They wear the right clothes. They love the music. They, even early on with the Rolling Stones, like, Keith Richards and stuff was listening to Carl Perkins, and that was an influence on them, So, rockabilly, yeah, I know what you're saying. Sometimes it's like a little trendy, a little fluffy, a little a little posery. I know what you're saying. But as a genre, I think it's a great genre, and you could do so much of it because you could have straight ahead rockabilly music like the Cats, but then you could also do shit like the Cramps, okay? Or you could do stuff like the Meteors out of England, which were another kind of crazy rockabilly based Cramps-ish kind of band.
Yeah.
And it's all good. It's just three chords,
So
it's three chord stuff.
Let me ask you a question. So let's start a little history. Let's start with the band called the Tomcats and work our way to the Stray Cat to the Brian Setzer Orchestra. What do you think? You want to?
Yeah. Well, I want to give a little back history on the three guys. Now, Brian Setzer was born April 10th, 1959 in Massapequa, Long Island.
Yep.
Now, his early interest was jazz, and he actually was playing some jazz instruments and stuff at the time. He used to find his way as a kid into the city and to a place called the Village Vanguard down in the West Village. And they would have a lot of jazz musicians there, and he would manage to see some of them as a kid. Later on, he really got into rock and roll. All right. By the time he was 18, punk rock was flourishing in the city. He had the CBGB scene and stuff like that. He was into that. And he was also into rockabilly. Rockabilly was something that he got into pretty much for the reason I just described.
Why do they call it rockabilly? Why do they call that rockabilly? Because just make it sound
I think it's a mix. It's a mix of hillbilly and rock and roll.
That's pretty much what it is, right? Hillbilly with rock and roll. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's how they got the word. Yeah, and he taught himself how to play guitar. Okay, so he was on his way. By the time he was 18, he was already putting bands together. Now Lee Rocker, the bass player in the Stray Cats, his real name is Leon Drucker. He was born August 3rd, 1961 in Massapequa. And he is the son of classical clarinet players Stanley and Naomi Drucker. Stanley actually played for the New York Philharmonic under Leonard Bernstein.
Wow.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, that's some heavy musical influence right there.
Yeah.
But he taught himself at age 12 to play the electric bass. But slowly he got interested in playing a slap bass, okay, which is the big double bass that you see him play. Okay, not an easy instrument to play. Not only is it bigger than you, okay, it's not easy to play that instrument. There's a lot to it. He got interested in Elvis, Carl Perkins, other rockabilly music, and that's why he kind of switched over to the big slap bass, because that was the bass that these people used.
Okay.
Okay. Now, Slim Jim Phantom, a guy I got a lot of admiration for. His real name was James McDonald. James McDonald. March 21st, 1961, he was born in Brooklyn, but he was raised in Massapequa, just like the other two guys.
Yep.
He started playing in his parents' jazz records. They were big jazz heads, and he started playing their records. He became a jazz drummer, and he actually got lessons from Mousy Alexander, okay, which is he's a famous drummer for Benny Goodman.
Oh yeah,
okay? Benny Goodman's band, okay?
Yeah.
And Jim taught himself how to play drums. He would use books, lesson books, things like that as a kid. As a young kid, even like 12, 13 years old. He got into rock and roll, and he got into rockabilly music and punk.
Well, was he a better drummer than Gary?
I think so. Okay, and yeah, we'll talk about Gary Setzer in a minute. Okay. Now the three of them met around Massapequa High School. Like I said, Brian Setzer was 2 years older than these guys in the 70s, and in 77, Brian had two bands going simultaneously. He had the Tomcats, which featured his brother Gary Setzer on drums, okay? A guy named Bob Beecher was on bass. Now, this band was also known as the Bloodless Pharaohs. And the Tomcats were rockabilly based.
Yeah.
The Bloodless Pharaohs were kind of like rockabilly 50s, kind of like, but they had elements of punk, elements of what would be known as goth. Okay, a little bit. They were Cramps-ish in a way. Okay, they had like a beat like the song Human Fly. They had songs that kind of sounded a little bit like that. They used to play CBGBs a lot. Okay, they also had some elements of the band Suicide. Okay, with in their sound. They were kind of strange. They had a keyboardist named Ken Kinnelly in the band. They were kind of new wave, gothic. I can't really describe them. Look them up. Bloodless Pharaohs. They had a couple of okay songs, but really Brian wanted to go in a straight ahead rockabilly direction. Now, you mentioned Gary. Gary's an interesting guy. I don't know him personally, but my buddy Rick Rivets told me some stories about him, and I think from what I gathered, Brian and Gary sometimes had some fights and stuff and things like that. Little things that I heard. There was a story one time where Gary showed up at a gig. I guess it was a Tomcats gig, and he forgot his sticks, and he went in the back of the club and got a couple of twigs from a tree. Okay, and he went out to do the gig with the twigs, and Brian, I think he flipped out. I don't even know if he finished the show or, whatever. But it was a whole big fight between the two of them. But Brian,
how the hell you forget your drumstick? What the fuck's wrong with? Yeah, it's a drummer. What the fuck's wrong with you?
I'm sure that's what Brian told him. I mean, Brian was very driven. Okay, so if you were going to do something like that, I'm sure he was going to piss you off. But I heard the story secondhand, so I don't know exactly what happened. But now the Tomcats would be playing a lot of the Long Island clubs around Massapequa and other places. The Blood Pharaohs kind of played more often in the city. They fit in better with what was going on at CB's and Max's and places like that. This went on for about 2 years or so, like between 77 and 79. In 79, Brian would break up the Tomcats, and he would break up the Bloodless Pharaohs. He had started hanging out with Lee and Jim, okay, and wanted to put together a band with them. The idea was to kind of put this like straight ahead rockabilly, Sun Records artists based, influenced kind of band. Okay, they were very influenced by Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent. Okay, those guys were early rockabilly artists. Bill Haley and the Comets, who did Rock Around the Clock. All right,
Yep.
that was a big influence on them. Immediately, right off the bat, they started to play shows and have a pretty big following right away. They would play CBGBs. He had his connections in the city from the Bloodless Pharaohs, so the Stray Cats went there. Max's Kansas City, CBs, other clubs on Long Island because they had played them before. Okay, so they had those connections. And they were doing well right off the bat for about a year. And then in the UK at that time,
that's what I didn't know that they really got the signing and it started in the UK to the point that dude, they were homeless. They were sleeping in the park and all kind of shit until they got a record label.
They heard about this teddy boy culture going on in England. There was a revival of that and a revival of rockabilly music, and that was right up their alley. Okay, so they felt that, and again, I think it goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. At that time, 1979, 1980, I think that there was kind of there might have been a little bit of a niche for them here to start out, but there was kind of like almost an open hostility to rockabilly music. I think a lot of people looked at it like this is just Happy Days music.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was definitely Happy Days music.
Well, yes, but it's a little more raw than that. Okay. It's not as poppy as Happy Days. But I mean, it's 50s. So Happy Days. Well, what's wrong with that? Okay. But they, I think that they felt that they wanted to fit in with a scene. They wanted to be part of a scene.
Yeah.
England, they knew their rockabilly history. Guys like Gene Vincent and stuff would do very well in England when he was alive. Even all of Europe, France was another place that had big rockabilly culture. We talked about this in other shows.
Yeah.
Okay. How that kind of stuff always did well in Europe. Now the teddy boy culture is interesting. Do you know anything about it, Rob?
No, I don't know what the hell that is.
Okay,
it sounds like Pansy Boys to me.
well, the Teddy Boys were in the 50s and early 60s. They were like rock and roll fans, okay? Traditional rock and roll fans, rockabilly based. They wore like the tight jeans and the waistcoats that almost look like revolutionary jackets, kind of. They were a little, but they were kind of be frilly, kind of. They had their hairs in pompadours, like Gary Glitter kind of looked early on. Okay, and this was a scene, and they were psycho fucks, man. They were like skinheads. They'd beat you up.
Oh yeah.
Okay. The Teddy Boys would not to be messed around with, especially in the 50s and 60s. There was a revival of that culture in the late 70s in England. A bunch of bands had taken that kind of look. I mentioned the Meteors earlier. They were one that were, well, you know what? I wouldn't call them Teddy Boys. They didn't have that look, but they had a great rockabilly sound that I think the Teddy Boys liked. In the 60s, you had two rival teen cultures going on. You had the Teddy Boys and you had the Mods. And if you ever watch like Quadrophenia, okay, the Who movie, okay, they're about the Mods, but then they would fight the Teddy Boys as well. Okay, it was two rival youth cultures going on. So anyway, there was a rockabilly and Teddy Boy revival in 79, 80 in England. They wanted to be part of it, so they sold all their shit and they left. And they went to England, okay? Like I said, they struggled at first. They were
you know why he went to England, right? Because there was a bartender, one of the clubs that play in Long Island from London, and he told Brian, "You're a fucking star. You look like a star. If you go back home to London, you're gonna be a fucking star." Yeah,
he heard about from this bartender, what was going on in England. In those days, there was no internet. There was no things like it. Even in the magazines, they probably weren't really talking about it. So he's like, "Wow, you mean what I do is really big in England?"
And guess what?
I'm going.
I'm going.
and that's, that takes a lot of balls.
Yeah.
Think about that. I don't know if I'd have the balls to just leave America and go somewhere.
Hell
You know what I
no.
mean? Like, yeah, it's hard, but they wanted to make it, and they, this is how they did it. So when they got to the UK, right away, they struggled at first, but they fit in with the scene going on, and they were kind of like spearheading this whole scene. What they did was interesting. They added kind of elements of punk rock into their look, into their style of music a little bit. Other bands were doing this as well. They had a great look, the Stray Cats, early on, and I think that attracted a lot of fans right away. They had this like 1950s fashion, but with
They were
a
unique looking. They were unique looking.
Right,
They were very different
a little bit of punk thrown in. Okay, so it kind of merged the two scenes, which was interesting. They would wear like those jackets I described. They're called drape jackets.
Yeah.
Okay, and they would wear creepers, which were like the pointed shoes, Western style shirts, and mix that in with other punk fashions at the time. Maybe like a cut off T-shirt or something like that. They would mix that. So, but again, they were not all just fashion. These guys were solid musicians.
Yeah.
All right. And that was obvious right away. And anybody that saw them, they were not to be fucked around with. They were really good. So when they arrived, what they did was they started playing under different names to get as much exposure as they could. Okay. What they would do is, in the clubs in those days, they could, like, if they were the Stray Cats on a Tuesday night, the same club wouldn't book them again on Wednesday.
No.
All right, it just was something that the clubs did. I don't know why, but what they used to do is they would say, okay, well, Monday night will be the Tomcats. Tuesday night will be the Stray Cats. Wednesday night will be Brian and the Tomcats or something like that. So they would mix the names up just to get out there and play as many gigs as possible, get paid, obviously, whatever little bit they were getting paid. So they wanted to play every night, and they would eventually settle into the Stray Cats. Once they had the exposure, then they were the Stray Cats. They were getting the money they wanted all the time.
Where did they get that name from? Where did they get that name from? Because I see that it was the name, the band name Stray Cat.
It was in a movie. It was in a movie.
Called That Will Be the Day.
Yeah, that'll be the day. That I think Stardust. I think.
Yeah, the sequel. Yeah.
That. And there was a movie, I think, around 1973, 74 that featured a band called the Stray Cats, I think. And I think they used that. It's just a cool thing. I mean, it fit in with the Rockabilly. He had the Tomcats. Maybe, he liked cats, I guess. I don't know. Brian Setzer, maybe he liked cats. So also, while they were in England, they kind of made friends and would see some of the remaining punk bands in 79, 80, like The Clash. Susie and the Banshees were big. A band that was coming up out of England at that time, the UK Subs, which would be part of that UK 82 scene with GBH and stuff like that. They were into seeing those bands as well.
That name come up a lot. The UK Subs come up a lot when we talk.
Oh yeah, they were great band. Great band. We did a show on GBH last year. UK Subs and GBH came out at the same time. They did a lot of shows together, stuff like that. Now, by mid-1980, they were playing a lot in England, and there was rumors of some record company interest in them. Members of even Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, and the Who had gone to see these guys. They'd heard about them.
Who was at that first show?
Who?
Who was at the very first show? The Pretenders. They played a show, and the Pretenders were in the audience. And
Chrissy Hynde was a fan.
Yeah, she probably fucked them all.
I don't know. It's possible. Chrissy's had her fair share. All right. Now, after a gig in London, they met backstage with musician and producer Dave Edmonds. All right. He was in a band called Rock Pile with Nick Lowe. Okay. And he was known as a big, roots rock and roll enthusiast. So he offered to work with them. And they ended up recording their first album, the self-titled Stray Cats, in 1981. It came out on Arista Records.
UK
England,
Arista.
UK, right, in England only. Okay. Runaway Boys was a big hit. Rock This Town was on that
Rock
album.
This Town, yeah.
Stray Cat Strut was on this album.
Yep.
Later in the year, they came out with a second album called Gonna Ball. All right. Now, the first album did fantastic. It had actually gone platinum. Okay. And the second one, Gonna Ball, came out later that year in November of 81. It wasn't as big a hit, but it did have several tracks like Baby Blue Eyes, Little Miss Prissy, You Don't Believe Me, Rev It Up and Go, and a song called Lonely Summer Nights. Those songs would end up on the first official American release, which would be soon.
Yeah.
It would be an album called Built for Speed.
Yep.
That second album, Gonna Ball, didn't do as good as the first one, but EMI in America was noticing them. And based on the combination of sales between the two albums, they decided to release a combination of these two albums, the best tracks from the both of them, and make an album called Built for Speed. All right. I think there would be at least one new track on there. The title track, I think, was the new one, Built for Speed. And it came out in June of 1982 in America. Now, there was a lot of hype at the time. Okay. EMI was doing a great job, giving some publicity out. There's this band. I mean, I remember in 82, okay, you would hear Runaway Boys. This was before
all the time.
Yeah, on LIR.
Yeah.
Okay, 92.7. I used to listen to that as a kid, and I'd be like, this is kind of cool. It's cool. But you didn't know much about them because the album wasn't here. Okay.
You want to hear something strange about them? Guess where the Stray Cat got the first gold album from?
First gold album from where?
Finland.
Finland has a great rock scene, right?
Dude, they went gold first in Finland. They were big in the UK, but the first gold album was in Finland. Can you believe that?
I didn't know that.
They were reaching out in the UK, and they were big in the UK, but for some reason, that second album pretty shot the bed. I don't know why.
Well, if you remember our Hanoi Rocks episode, okay, they went from Finland to England, okay, and did very well. So that, I think in Europe, if you're big in the UK, you could be big in the other places as well because they look to the UK. You know what I'm saying? So, Built for Speed came out in June of 82, and the first single off it was a song called Stray Cat Strut.
That was great.
But interesting enough, it actually bombed at first. It actually stalled at number 109. And what happened was they put out a second single, Rock This Town.
Oh, that was great.
That took off and went top 10.
Yeah.
So what they did was they actually re-released after that Stray Cat Strut again as a single. And at that time, it got to number 3. But also interesting, what was happening in 1982? MTV.
Okay. They loved them. They
were MTV darlings. As soon as they put out the Rock This Town video and the Stray Cat Strut video, I went and I watched those two last night. I hadn't seen them in a long time. And I'm like, God, you couldn't get away from Stray Cat Strut. I remember that was like
everywhere.
Okay, yeah, it was everywhere. The video was on like every hour. That was the time when MTV was great. I mean, they played anything anybody that had a video, they would play.
It was great.
Yeah. So that,
but they were also all over MTV. MTV, they had that look that MTV really liked, and they would put it out. They had little commercial. You're watching MTV. You're watching MTV. I want my MTV.
I think Brian Setzer had one that said, "I want my MTV."
It was crazy, man.
I mean, that was a great way. It was a brand new way to promote yourself. Come out with a cool video. I mean, Rock This Town is great. He's like riding a motorcycle and everything.
That's a great video.
Got the chick with him and stuff. I mean, it's a cool video. So, Built for Speed would actually sell 1 million copies in the United States and Canada, and got to number 2 on the charts for 15 weeks.
Wow.
Okay, so they stayed at number 2. In 1983, now I'm just, I didn't look it up, but I was curious as to what stopped them from going to number one. And the only thing I could think of maybe was Thriller. What do you think? You think that was around the same
that
time?
That might have been. What year was that? 92?
82, Rob.
82. Let me look at it. Let's see what I can find real quick.
Yeah, no, I'm just, I'm curious because to be at number 15 for number 2, I'm sorry, for 15 weeks in a row, there had to be something big blocking you. It had to be Thriller. What was number 1 in June of the summer of 82? It had to be Thriller, right?
Yeah, so you know what was out that time? You had you had Eye of the Tiger, I Like Rock and Roll, Ebony. Let me see what was.
But I'm talking albums. Those
albums.
Those are songs.
Number one albums. Albums or record?
Records, yeah, records.
Albums.
Number 1 records of 1982.
You had. Wow, this is fucking weird. While you keep talking, let me look it up because I gotta go through some stuff here.
All right. Well, in 83, we'll get back to it in a second. In 83, the Stray Cats started recording their third album. It would be their second in America, but their third album. It was called Rant and Rave with the Stray Cats. And it came out in August of 83. Now, critically, it was very well received. It's a great album. Commercially, it didn't match Built for Speed, but it did make the top 10 single She's Sexy in 17, which is one of their biggest hits. And there was also a top 40 ballad called I Won't Stand in Your Way. And very interesting enough is years ago, like about 1991, I had a conversation with Joey Ramone one time, and it was in the Ramones van. I was getting a ride from them. And I asked Joey, what are you listening to these days? Now, this was 1991. And he goes, well, I've been listening to the Stray Cats a lot. I said, really? I said, I love the Stray Cats. And he's like, yeah. He goes, I kind of missed them the first time around, but I've been discovering them again. And I'm like, yeah, well, what are your songs that you like? And he said, I Won't Stand in Your Way was like his favorite. That's kind of cool. Little tidbit there.
That is cool.
That was a popular MTV video as well. Okay. And one thing that with that song, I Won't Stand in Your Way, a ballad like that, I think you really appreciate Setzer's voice. Okay. He's got a great voice. I mean, the guitar playing is fantastic, but he's got a great voice for the style of music he does, and that they do. The whole band. I mean, they did backing vocals and stuff, but Brian really was the forefront when it came to the singing, and he's got a underrated voice and underrated guitar playing.
He is very underrated.
How he stays under the radar like that, I don't know. I guess he doesn't really promote himself like that, but. I mean, I think people kind of forget about him, and I guess he doesn't care. He does his own thing. But by 1984, there started to be like musical and personal conflicts in the band. All right. They kind of started to go their separate ways a little bit. Slim Jim married actress Britt Eklund, who was about 20 years older than him, actually. So that was a very interesting marriage right there. Britt Eklund, if you remember, was the Bond girl in Man with the Golden Gun.
Oh, yeah,
she's the blonde Swedish actress. She was in the original Wicker Man with Christopher Lee. That's a great movie. He married her, and then Brian Setzer started kind of hanging out with other rock stars. He was hanging out with Bob Dylan. He was hanging out with Stevie Nicks. He ended up on the tour playing guitar for Robert Plant and the Honey Drippers. Okay. Remember he had that cover of Sea of Love, Robert Plant?
Yeah. It was good, that cover.
Yeah, that was good. And he actually toured with them, I think, for a little bit on the American tour. Late in 84, the Stray Cats added a second guitarist to their band briefly. Okay, it was pretty much just for a live tour. His name was Tommy Byrnes, and he was a Long Island native, and he did the European and American tour. I always thought that was kind of a weird move. It didn't last long, but I never understood exactly why they did that. All right, their music didn't really call for another guitar player, but I guess maybe they wanted to beef their sound up a little bit.
I think
don't know.
they did.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, after that European and American tour, Brian would kind of dissolve the band, and the other two guys weren't for it. They didn't really understand why they were breaking up at pretty much the height of their popularity. I mean, they were really peaking.
They were good.
Okay, Brian though felt frustrated. He felt restless. He wanted to do something different. He was getting a little bit bored in the band. I think years later he regretted it. I think years later he even said it was kind of stupid to break up the band at its peak. But listen, everybody was in their 20s. You have different mentality. You got the whole world ahead of you, and he was bored. He was starting to get some popularity on his own. So he would go solo, okay? And he would kind of get away from the rockabilly sound a little bit briefly and get into kind of a roots rock genre, a little bit different from rockabilly, more rock and roll. He put together a band called Brian Setzer and the Radiation Ranch. And he released an album called The Knife Feels Like Justice. And I remember that video, and I remember the song, and it was a decent song, kind of like, it didn't do that great. It didn't, it was like maybe low top 40s at the most. But I remember the video getting played quite a bit. And when he put that band together, they got their first major gig at the Farm Aid Festival in 1985. Remember Farm Aid?
I remember Farm Aid. That was a fantastic that was
Willie Nelson put that together, I think, right? And what's his name? John Cougar Mellencamp, right? Now Lee Rocker and Slim Jim Phantom would collaborate with former David Bowie guitarist Earl Slick, and they created a band called Phantom Rocker and Slick. Okay, and they made this great album, self-titled album, Phantom Rocker and Slick, and it was a single on there called Men Without Shame. All right, great song, different than the Stray Cats, more rock and roll. Okay, not rockabilly, but I think that this album, this Phantom Rocker and Slick album, is like one of the best albums of the 80s.
Wow.
All right. Yeah. I mean, if you go through the albums of the 80s, you have to put this in there. It's an amazing album. Guitar work is unbelievable. Keith Richards actually plays on it. Nicky Hopkins plays piano on a couple of songs. Keith Richards plays on a couple of songs. Earl Slick is a great guitar player. And, he's played with Bowie. He's played with other people. He's had his own stuff. Really talented guy. They had a hit single with Men Without Shame. It was a big MTV hit. Do you remember the song? If you hear it, you remember it. Had
probably remember if I see it.
Great build up to it. It's just a cool song. Every once in a while, I'll drag it out on the RockerMike song of the day or something like that. So
you want to hear something crazy? They also didn't they open up for the Rolling Stones? Also, the Stray Cats at one point.
I think they may have.
No, they I think they did
in the early 80s, right? In the early 80s. So the Stones were probably touring. I'm trying to think. Was that the Tattoo You, or I think that's all they did. They didn't tour between 82 and 88. All right, so
no, yeah,
I think it must have been early on. I don't think they toured with the Stray Cats in the late 80s, right? Not the Still Wheels tour. I remember Living Color in 88 opening for the Stones.
But they pretty much went there and they were like, fuck, we gotta go in there and do this. And they got the thing and they will open up for the Rolling Stone. It was like a once in a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure when that was. It had to be early 80s, like 81, 82. Probably, maybe even in England. But was it in America or was it in England?
I think it was in you know what? I can't tell you that. I think they just said that they got the call to open up for the Rolling Stone, where they were just thinking about breaking up, and they decided to stay together just because of that.
Okay. You got me on that one. I'm not
And
exactly sure
and they
when that
said we're
was.
gonna get a bunch of new people, a bunch of new they just got like
Yeah,
that brought new life to them.
of course. I mean, if someone's telling you the Stones want you to open up, they briefly would reunite. Okay, they had their little side things going on for
Yeah.
about a year or two, and they would briefly reunite in 1986 for a mostly covers album called Rock Therapy. But they would break up again right after that, and 1989 they would come back again to do the Blast Off album. Now I saw them on that tour, the Blast Off tour. Uh, that was amazing. I also saw them early on in '84, before they broke up originally.
Wow.
So I've seen them twice in the '80s. The '89 show was at the Ritz when it had moved up to 54th Street. Okay, and I remember seeing them there. There was the title track, Blast Off, was fucking great, and there was a song on there called Gene and Eddie, which was a tribute to Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran. Just a great, solid Stray Cats album.
So it looked
These
like
guys
it might have been the Police. It looked like.
What do you mean the Police? Oh, the Police. Oh,
I think it might have.
Synchronicity.
I think it might have been the
Yeah,
Police. That's what
yeah.
I'm looking at right here. That's what
Okay,
I'm
all right.
getting.
So right. I mean, Synchronicity. I forgot about that album. That album was huge in '82.
Huge.
Right?
It was big. Yeah.
Every breath you take and all that. Yeah. I mean, to be at number 2 for 15 weeks in a row and just not hit number 1 at least one week, something big was stopping you. So yeah, I can see that. If not Michael Jackson, I can see the Police. Not one of my favorite bands, but anyway.
Who, the Police?
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Not a fan.
Ooh.
I know I'm in the. Maybe you want to put a bullet in my head for saying it, but I just never really liked that band. I just never liked Sting. Great musicians, whatever. Okay, fine, but just never. When I hear Every Breath You Take, I turn it off. Stray Cats were better. They should have been number 1 at least one of those 15 fucking weeks. Okay, but now. In '89, when they were doing Blast Off, they ended up on tour with Stevie Ray Vaughan. That would have been a good lineup to see.
That would have been a very...
Yeah. Now, at that point, they were no longer involved with EMI, and there was a small label called Liberation Records that put out an album that they worked with Nile Rodgers on. Nile Rodgers, formerly of Chic, and he produced like Duran Duran and bands like that. Your favorite band, Duran Duran.
I love Duran Duran, man.
I know you do. There was an album they made called Let's Go Faster with Nile. Okay. And in 1992, they would come back again and collaborate with Dave Edmonds once again for the album Choo Choo Hot Fish. And that had the great song on it, Elvis on Velvet. Very cool song.
Elvis on Velvet.
A lot of slap bass driving that song. A lot of Lee Rocker on that one.
Wow.
They also did another covers album called Original Cool, but they would call it quits again. Now, remember, at this time, Brian Setzer was putting together the Brian Setzer Orchestra. All right, that was something that he really wanted to do. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning.
Yeah.
This was something that he would have a big hit with. He still does. He still plays all the time with the orchestra. He wanted to create what used to be called a review. Okay, a review band. And that's when you have this big orchestra. Guys like Eddie Cochran used to do it. Okay, you'd have this orchestra backing you, and he would be playing guitar
music
in front of everybody. So it was cool. Swing music in the 90s had a little revival. Remember that? Okay.
Oh yeah.
And he kind of fit. He actually, I guess the Brian Setzer Orchestra can be given credit for starting that. There were other bands that were doing it. Okay, no one did it as good as these guys. Okay,
nah.
when he did the cover of "Jump Driving Well," the Louis Prima song, that was a big hit. And I remember one thing I got to mention too.
All right, Mike. So you're 100% what? It was Michael Jackson Thriller.
Oh.
That's what it was, and then in August, it was the Police. So that's the two people that were blocking the Thriller.
So it was
and
a combination. It was a combination of them.
Yeah.
Fuck them, man. Stray Cats are better than both of them. All right.
I don't know. That Michael Jackson album was incredible. You know what? I'm not the King of Pop, but that Thriller album was fantastic. I hate to say it. I love that album.
You know, I guess I know I bought it. I think I did. Yeah, I know I bought it. I mean, everybody bought it, right?
You definitely bought it.
If you, I mean, it's just, I think everybody bought the record, but it just was like something you had to have. The world was different then.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, you know, you had to have that fucking record. And I mean, the song Thriller with Vincent Price on it, you know,
that was great.
You know,
I still think his best album was Off the Wall.
You always say that, right? Yeah, Off the Wall.
That was Black Michael Jackson.
You want to know the truth? Musically, I would agree. Okay, musically, I would rather listen to that album than Thriller.
Oh, that was a much better album, I think.
Yeah, he actually looked like a black guy.
Yeah, that's when he was black. He had the fro. Then he turned into this little old white woman. What the fuck happened to Michael?
That's a whole other show. Get a little conspiracy 420 thrown in.
I know. So let me ask you a question, because before he started the orchestra, he actually did something by himself and he failed. Brian Setzer.
A couple of solo albums.
Yeah, they were nothing, man. They were like, you ever heard one of those albums? They were shit. They were a bag of shit.
Well,
Mike.
yeah, they weren't that good, but I will say, I think it was early 2000s. He came out with an album called Ignition, and there was a track called 1959, like I mentioned earlier.
Oh,
bunch of other songs. That album was really good. I mean, it played like a Stray Cats album almost. And that album was good. I think that's my favorite solo album from him. But you know, yeah, he had some bombs in there. But the orchestra was doing well for him through the 90s. But by 2004, the Stray Cats would reunite again for a month-long tour of Europe. They were always big in Europe. All right.
Yeah.
And they released a live album called Rumble in Brixton. Okay, instead of Rumble in Brighton, Rumble in Brixton. And there was one new studio track on that album called Mystery Train Kept a Rolling. In 2007, they hit the road again with ZZ Top and the Pretenders. Okay, their old friend Christy Hine. Yeah. And they hadn't done an American tour in 15 years at that point.
Wow.
Okay, so since 92. And
they went to Japan. How did they do in Japan? Yeah, they must have loved it in Japan.
Everybody does good in Japan. Okay, it's huge. They love American bands. And let me tell you something. Japan has a kick-ass rockabilly scene. Okay.
Oh yeah.
There are so many Japanese rockabilly fans wearing the clothes, doing their hair up like Elvis. Okay. It's amazing. There's a band that comes around. I saw them last year called Guitar Wolf. They've been around for about 25 years. I used to see them at the Continental. Okay?
You told me that. Guitar.
Yeah. Japanese band, Japanese rock band that they all dress like they look like rockabilly guys. They got like hair pompadour, the sunglasses. They look like Japanese Link Rays. Okay, and they don't play a word of English. Okay, but they're just fucking great. They rock out. I saw them open for Nashville Pussy in Brooklyn last year, and they're amazing. But in Japan, the Stray Cats always did well. So to go there, they definitely were going to make some money. Also in 2008, they would tour Australia and New Zealand for the first time in almost 20 years, about 18 years. And in April of 2009, it being Brian Setzer's 50th birthday, there was a special concert that they reunited for in Minneapolis. They would kind of take a hiatus for a while, for about 9 years, actually. They wouldn't play together again. And in 2018, they reunited for a one-off gig at the Rockabilly Festival in Vegas. That's done in every April. That's something we need to go to, Rob. I've been wanting to go to this. I think it's called the Viva Las Vegas Rockabilly Festival. It's every year. It's in April. Okay, I think this year they didn't have it, obviously, but it's at the Orleans Hotel, which is like right off the Strip. The Orleans Hotel is like right next to the Rio. Okay, you've been to Vegas, you know what I'm talking about. right? It's right off the strip. And every April they have this Rockabilly festival. They have bands, okay? And the Stray Cats did this one in 2018. But it's very cool. They have like bands. You can get tattoos. They've got like old car shows and things like that. It's a lot of fun. I've never done it. I want to go. But as soon as they announce it, the tickets go like this.
Oh yeah, that's like anytime they do something like that, it's sold out. Especially those.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it
almost
actually
like that's like a convention almost. You know.
It's exactly what it is. It's a Rockabilly convention.
Yeah.
Okay. And whenever they have it announced when it's going to be, it's at the Orleans Hotel, and the Orleans Hotel just sells out in a second. So I've never been able to make it to that. I'd like to. Maybe next year.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. So they reunited. They went to Nashville. They recorded this album for the 40th anniversary, and they did the album first video called "Cat Fight" over a dog like me. Have you seen that?
Parentheses. Yes, yeah. Great song, great video. There's a nice little like clip that you can see on YouTube about them in the studio. Like, did you see it?
I haven't seen that. I didn't even know they made another album, because I'm reading this for the first time.
This was a big story last year because it came out. Okay, I think the pandemic squashed touring plans they had. I don't think they came around with it. They were planning to. And
this is the original band, right?
Oh, of course. Yes, the three guys.
All right.
Yeah. Now, one thing I got to mention too is during the whole time when the band was on hiatus, the several times they were on hiatus, Setzer was doing stuff, but so was Lee Rocker and Slim Jim. All right, Lee Rocker has released a couple of solo albums. He's done some collaborations with people. Slim Jim played with a bunch of people. He played with Lemmy in a band called Headcat. Okay, Headcat. I have the album. It's fucking great.
He played with Carl Perkins.
He played with Carl Perkins too before he died. Yeah,
he played with George Harrison, Ringo Starr, Willie Nelson, Leonard Russell, Keith Richards, and a bunch. So this guy's like, and I think,
you could hear Slim Jim on Little Steven's Underground Garage.
And speaking of them, you saw the shout out we got from Bill Kelly, DJ Bill Kelly.
Yeah, let me plug him right now. Bill Kelly, Saturday nights, okay, on Little Steven's Underground Garage. Check out his Black Hole Bandstand show. It's great. He's been around forever. He's a fantastic DJ. You're going to get offbeat rock and roll that you've never heard before. He got his start on WFMU out of Jersey. I'm not sure if that was his start, but he was on there for many years. But I love his show on Little Steven's Underground Garage. Sirius XM Channel 21, Saturday nights, 8 p.m. to midnight. Make sure you check out that show. I get a lot of influence from him. Getting back to the Stray Cats, that album was their 40th anniversary, so they called the album 40. They called it 40. It was on Surf Dog Records. It came out. It was critically acclaimed. Okay, people were saying it was great. It was kind of like a little different than what they had done in the past. You had straight ahead rockabilly songs, and you also had a little bit of more of like a 60s garage sound.
Yeah.
And tracks like Cry Danger, okay, was one that was like that. Just solid rock and roll, something that you just don't hear anymore today.
You know that they added another guy to the band. They added a rhythm guitar player called Mark Leo. You know anything about Mark Leo?
I think it was just for the album, right?
Yeah, but it's a rhythm guitar from 2019 to the present. So I guess they might have added him for the shows or something, maybe.
Yeah. I'm not sure how many shows they got in. Okay, I mean the album came out in May. I'm trying to remember. Did they come around last year? I don't recall them doing that.
Yeah, so May 24 it came out. May 24th.
The album, but I'm saying, did they tour it right away? I don't recall. But I could be wrong. I probably would have went if I knew.
I would have gone see the Stray Cats. Are you crazy? That would have been a great show to see. Show.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you, man, beautiful women at the Stray Cat shows. Okay, everybody dresses rockabilly. Okay, and I love that look on women, and and guys. You know, I used to kind of do it back in the 90s. I used to have black pompadour kind of thing going for a while. Okay,
I never let my hair grow that long.
Yeah, no. I can show you pictures, man. I had like, you know, the hair coming down like this, and I used to wear creepers and you know, stuff like that. So that's all I got for you today, man. The Rock, you know, I'm glad the Stray Cats are still around. They got back together. I hope that when this pandemic is over and they can start touring, we can go see them and you know, get behind them again. They're a great band, great American band.
Hold on, I can't hear you right now. Give me a second.
Okay, sure.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
My alarm just went off. Hold on, let me see something real quick.
All right.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, all right, now. I went off there for a little bit. My alarm went off.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so where can we find you, Rob?
Well, you can find me at Anything Getting Lumped Up. And like on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and any other social media, Getting Lumped Up. I also want to give a shout out to my boy Jack D. He keeps giving us great guests.
Jack D.
He's the one that gave us Mark Sargent, and he got another person that has a YouTube. It's about conspiracy, but it's very easy to listen. It's about 5 minutes long, and it's something you can listen while you're in the shitter or you want something quick to listen to, you know?
We all listen to something when we're in the shitter.
So, Mike, where can I find you?
Okay. I am on Instagram, RockerMike212. I am on Twitter, RockerMike3. I am on Facebook under my real name, Michael Baker, and I run the rock group with you, Rob, the Rockshow podcast group page. Check it out on Facebook. Right now I'm going through a little bit of Facebook jail, but I'll be back soon. You know, I don't know. I'm always getting picked on by this fucking social media.
Did you see what Jay Boogie did? He did one with you, free Mike Baker.
Yeah, with the jail cell in front of me.
With the jail cell. Free Mike Baker. Dude, that shit with the Facebook jail is real, man. They're just throwing people in jail for it's crazy, man.
All I'll say is that they didn't tell me what I did, and they said it was a post from last year.
You know what it was? That might be somebody that got a little beef with you, and that's all it takes. Somebody start calling you out, and they'll start locking you up, man.
Well, you know, keyboard warriors, they're all pussies.
You know, hey, there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there. They're just go behind the scenes.
I mean, you know, this is the world we live in today, man. This cancel culture shit. You know, they want to destroy you if you don't agree, and you know, I mean, I try to stay away from politics on the Rockshow page and all that stuff, and I don't like to. You know, we don't talk about it there.
Now,
but I'm in some other groups and stuff like that, and somebody must have just didn't like something I said. Oh well.
Hey, that's right. Yeah, that's what happened. I say a lot of shit. I just don't give a fuck. I've been saying shit for a long time, and I just always say I say what's on my mind. You know, I'm not like you know what the cancel culture is. A cancel culture, whatever they do, let them. It get to the point that you're canceling so many people to the one day that one person cancel you. Hasta la vista, baby. Guess because it will come back. Karma's a motherfucker.
Yeah. Oh,
you know that?
It'll depend. The pendulum will go the other way. But you know what. You know, what sucks about being in Facebook jail now is I can't really get all the stuff out there I do every day on the Rock Show group page.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I mean, you've picked up a little bit of the slack, but you know, you're busy. So everybody suffers because of one little fucking pussy that decided to get mad at me and report me or you know whatever. So if you're out there, fuck you. If you're watching, and you know, I don't know who you are. Maybe I'll find out who you are, and payback's a bitch, okay? But, you know, whatever.
Mike, and next week we got a show that people been asking for a long, long time. Frank Zappa.
Yep.
I have like a love-hate relationship with Frank Zappa.
I admire him as a trailblazer, okay, as a musician. The music is kind of, you know, spotty for me. But we may have a guest We may be bringing in a friend of mine that is like a giant Zappa head, so he'll bring some, some good stories in there and stuff, and hopefully tell us and convince us how great Frank Zappa is. But the thing is we did this as part of the December schedule. This will be the Zappa one will be shown the first week of December. As just a gift to everybody out there. All right. The fans, I want to thank them all for the last year and a half. You guys have been great. You've been solid. You've been, staying with us and our nonsense. and we asked everybody to vote on, what they wanted to hear. So 3 weeks out of December are all fan requested stuff that they voted on. Frank Zappa, Grand Funk Railroad, and The Only Ones, the British band, The Only Ones. I'm looking forward to that.
You know what show I'm looking forward to? The Robert Johnson. And you know what's a guy we should have put on for the fucking Black History? Year. For Black History? Leadbelly. Leadbelly was a huge guitarist. Leadbelly.
Yeah. I mean, there's no shortage of guys we could have picked, I kind of picked what I thought was like some of my favorites, but also stuff that people might be familiar with the most. Robert Johnson's very important. That's the Black History Month. That's the Black History Month in February. So, we got plenty of time for that. That's all I got for you today, Mr. Rossi.
That was pretty good. So once again, people, if you're listening to us, please support Bill Kelly. Go to XM Sirius XM Radio.
Saturday night.
What is it? Channel 21?
Channel 21, Little Steven's Underground Garage, Bill Kelly, Black Hole Bandstand Show. Check it out.
Because the guy gave us a shout out. Didn't have to do it. I appreciate what he did for us. And guys, remember, don't get drunk.
Get drunk. Get lumped up.
Get lumped up. See you next week.
Take care.
Podcast you will hear that will be music to your ears. You'll learn about bands you love or may not know, and it's only here on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. Ooh, yeah, on the Rock Show. Don't tell your friends and everyone you know. Let's get lumped up on the Rock Show.